People need to understand that this problem has been in the making for like 100 years. We have to work with the water companies to properly understand their system. We have models that are used for quite a few different purposes, designing the sewer systems, checking how a system operates against regulations, or to help you understand the system. We explain things, and the people on the ground, they understand full well that there's this uncertainty, but it's like once we have a design, we cannot come back to it. It is good to show open data. If we build one tank or one solution, one blue-green infrastructure, and we build another one there 5 years later, people think we had it wrong.
That is Alma Schellart, Senior Lecturer in Water Engineering at the University of Sheffield, England. Alma aims to understand the big picture around water flows and quality throughout the whole city, using data and modeling to advise the water industry on better management of sewer infrastructure. She also adopts a conscious approach to considering how uncertainty is introduced at various points in this process and supports transparency through open data and effective communication with stakeholders and the general public in order to avoid unintended consequences and to design more robust and future-proof urban drainage infrastructure. My name is Peter Marcus Bach, and this is the Grand Challenges Podcast, a show about inspiring individuals who are stepping up to tackle the global challenges that our world is facing in their own unique ways. We reflect on the many out-of-the-box ways our guests have navigated the complexity and intricacies of the environment at the cutting edges of science, engineering, technology, and design. On today's show, Alma and I trace her steps from growing up in the Netherlands to how she found her way to Sheffield, England. We discuss the use of data, models, and different types of uncertainties to guide infrastructure decisions, the values and pitfalls of making data public, and an insight into solving the age-old urban drainage challenge of water quantity and quality through an integrated lens. Detailed information is provided in the show notes over at peterandbach.com/podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and please enjoy the show. Welcome to the show, Alma.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm very glad that we could finally schedule this in sunny Innsbruck.
I know.
Just after a conference we have both attended, our famous series, the Urban Drainage Modeling Conference. So thank you, Innsbruck, for giving us this room.
And it's got a view. Actually, no, this one doesn't. But the other rooms had an amazing view, didn't they?
Yeah, definitely. Of the mountains. I mean, at the University of Innsbruck, I highly recommend everyone to come visit. But yeah, campus situated right in the valley, and you see mountains on both sides. Actually, we don't really want the view because, windows tend to reflect sound. So, audio quality on the Grand Challenges podcast is very important.
How is it in a nice and quiet classroom?
Exactly. And yeah, so we finally have a chance to sit down and to really discuss many topics around modeling, uncertainty, urban drainage. Given an urban drainage modeling conference, we should probably touch upon that.
We should talk about models and data and urban drainage, shouldn't
Which has been very much front and center of our minds for the last few days.
Yes.
Yeah, but I guess we always have to start with something that's a bit more, close to your heart. And that, you told me, is knitting amongst many other fun hobbies you have. Could you tell me a bit about that?
I know. Yes, I get very worked up by technology sometimes. Things that need a new battery and a password and need to restart and don't do what I want them to do. So when I relax at home, I need something that doesn't take any high-tech technology.
Nah.
Even for like maybe a modeling or a data kind of engineering nerd, I actually really like some things without electronics. So knitting, and then I love gardening, and I love walking in the Peak District, which is close to Sheffield. Okay. I mean, I'm actually wearing my home knitted top.
Wow, that I feel like you need a lot of patience to knit an entire top pullover.
Yes, it's also very good for relaxing if you've had a stressful day and you're really kind of annoyed at something that happened or work and it's playing on your mind. It's kind of meditative.
Yeah. Actually, you mentioned to me when we were going through the preparation for this episode that it's become there's been a resurgence in knitting amongst Generation Z and Generation Alpha. I thought that was quite interesting.
Me too.
What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, I used to do lots of crafting and things like that. When I was a kid, I used to really like doing lots of art and drawing and some knitting and making little clothes from my toys and all sorts. And then I think it was Henriette Jensen. She was a few years ago. So I got so stressed. I picked up my knitting and then I was an excellent idea. And then I could see other people doing this as well. So we thought it's that's what they say, grandma hobbies are becoming popular again. So I thought I was really uncool, liking my crafting, and houseplants are a thing. I've always had lots of houseplants, and I fill the office and my colleagues' office and my friends with little cuttings. And I've been doing that for 20 years. Wow. And now it's been cool, because I thought I was like mostly uncool, but now I hear it's all trendy to have houseplants and be knitting. So I've been like years ahead of the...
Well, it's interesting,
unusual.
Actually, because I'm still terrible with houseplants. I mean, we tried again this year to plant some herbs and roses this time. We plant 3 pots of roses. Only one has survived so far. I'm sort of secretly hoping the other 2 kind of grow again, but we gave it a pretty big haircut, call it that. But people will know from back in episode 10, I had this discussion about houseplants, and I'm terrible about it. I can't keep a plant alive to save me. Although our little mini orange tree has survived at least 1 year. So let's see what happens in the coming years.
Well, it's a good start. Yeah, I'm the opposite. I feel sad. I can't really kill them. And then they multiply, and then I can't. I feel sad putting it on the compost, so I make another one and another one. Then maybe once a year I bring a box to the office, like houseplant looking for a new home.
Oh man, I wish
to friends.
I wish I could be in that situation. I'm not even at the propagation of plants yet. I still have to learn the care part.
No, I have good friends, so we make good teams because they kill them, and I just keep supplying them with new ones.
I guess they say opposites attract in that sense. But you mentioned a very interesting point: the meditative aspect of these kinds of activities. I was looking up this whole phenomenon of Gen Z and Gen Alpha liking these kinds of hobbies, and I found the Reddit post. We'll put that in the show notes. But supposedly, and listeners, you may have seen this if you're on social media. You often see these TikTok or Instagram reels where they're trying to explain something, and then in the other corner of the video, someone is, I don't know, baking a cake or, pruning a plant, which I thought was very strange. And they've started to make these imaginary devices where you slot your phone in between whatever that device is supposed to do. So like a computer game controller or, I don't know, some audio device. Apparently, that distraction, whether it's, visual or dexterity, is supposed to be meditative and helps you concentrate better. And I feel like there's been this resurgence or at least emergence of mindfulness amongst the community. And I think that's where Gen Z and Gen Alpha, who just grow up with technology, just really love to engage in these activities because it is a complementary activity to just the tech world.
Yeah, I think it's good because it's really when you're tired, you come back from your school or work or whatever, and you just end up mindless doom scrolling, and you just end up sort of numbing yourself or getting really stressed and you can't sleep. And it's easy to do. I put a timer on my phone to see how often I use it. And then you think you have no time, and then you see how many times. I've also spent like 1.5 hours a day. And I find that a lot. It's like 1.5 hours of my day what I was doing. But I read online that people say often 3 hours or 4 hours.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are we all doing?
It's a bit scary when you then look at the entire week and how much time you've actually spent, in front of a screen. So, I guess, a few good tips, knitting, plants, I guess walks in nature as well. You do like those. And keep your mind, I guess, fresh before you go back to the technology and the modeling in your case.
Yes.
So you're based in Sheffield, but you're actually Dutch. It took me a while to realize that you're actually Dutch. And I should have just figured it out from the name. But could you say your full name for me? Yeah,
it's Alma Neeltje Antonia Schellart.
Wow. Okay. So, very, very Dutch. And I love the Dutch accent. I think, Germans come close to it, but nothing as eloquent as the Dutch language. And you actually studied in Delft before coming to the UK. And you're based more in the field of urban drainage, specifically sewer systems, and also the integrated or holistic picture. So how the sewer also sits within the broader context. What motivated you to go into really this highly technical discipline in the first place? Yeah,
that's quite slightly random, I guess, or slightly unplanned, really.
Okay.
Because as I said, I always loved nature and plants and animals, and I was convinced I was going to study biology. But then I grew up in the middle of Rotterdam, which is a big city.
Yes.
And I'm quite close to my family. And then I really wanted to do marine biology. I've always been according to my parents, from age 2, I've been obsessed with fishes. Then we went to a Chinese restaurant. They put me next to the aquarium with the fishies, and I was calm and quiet.
When you said Chinese restaurant, I thought eating fish or...
No, the ones in, I don't know, in the Netherlands, they always used to have an aquarium.
Yeah, that's pretty common across the world.
So they used to always make that sure they had the table next to the aquarium. So I was nice and calm and just watching the fish while everyone else was enjoying it. But so I wanted to really do marine biology or aquatic biology. I'd signed up for it. I went to the open day and everything. And then I was literally finishing my exams, more or less, my secondary school exams, thinking that meant I had to move away from Rotterdam. And it was sort of more or less the other side of the Netherlands. And they had a campus in the countryside. It meant I had to move out of the city, away from my family in the countryside. Yeah. And I got a right panic. I'm not ready for that. So, and in Rotterdam itself, you can study economy, which I thought was boring. So I went to the next one, Delft, the next closest. And I was like, also, I had good marks for maths and physics. And I thought, well, maybe a shame to do something like that. And then I saw you could do water management. It was called, it had a really long name.
Just to sound unique.
Waterbeheer, Milieu en Gezondheidstechniek.
I'm sorry?
That's what they renamed it, water management, by the time I got in my 4th or 5th year. But it used to be water management, environment and health technique or sanitary engineering. Yeah, so sort of water, environment and sanitary engineering, something like a really lengthy sort of Dutch Germanic descriptive name. Yeah. But I found that and I thought that sounds quite good as well, because I was quite keen. I was a member of Greenpeace and the Worldwide Fund for Nature, all these youth magazines, and I wanted to go in environmental conservation. And I was like, these stupid engineers and people, they build things anyway. How they build a road, whether you like it or not. So it felt for me like I was going to the dark side and just have a look for a year. And then I thought I'll just try it for a year, because TU Delft, it's in the Netherlands, it's always like, that's difficult. You know, it has a bit of a reputation. It has a bit of a scary reputation. So, and I guess this is where I feel I'm getting older, because in the 90s, coming in Delft, it was pretty harsh in the first year. I'm a lecturer now, and they did things there. You would never, ever get away with that now. You just wouldn't do this. Yeah, so I kind of went there more or less because I thought I'll try this for a year, and then maybe in a year I feel ready to move up north and away from Rotterdam. But then after a year, I was like, well, actually, if I get a job in this, I can maybe do more meaningful things, because I can study the animals and campaign for them, or I can study how to make the water systems better and less polluting. So that's how I got there. Well, I kind of failed pretty much most of my modules in the first semester. And I had to go, this is what Delft is different from now. It was quite horrible. Like, they failed about 2/3 of students in the first sort of few maths and mechanics modules. And then we all had to go like in front of 3 lecturers. And it's like, are you sure you're in the right location here?
Intimidating.
It was really intimidating. Are you sure you're here? Are you sure this is for you? Because your marks are bad. And if you carry on like this, you're going to fail. And are you sure this is the right place for you? And they were like not supportive at all. They were intimidating.
Wow. But you said, no, I'm determined.
Yeah, I don't know. I can see that would have scared off a lot of people. I think my rescue was that I was like, I was only here to try it for a year. If it doesn't work, who cares? I'm going to study the other study. And then I did and I did a lot of partying. We had quite a bit in the first year. The introduction week was much, much longer than, so we did a lot of partying and not really much studying. And I realized that actually for the first time in my life, I had to kind of really study a bit harder maybe than I did before. I couldn't really do the evening before anymore, or the day before. So I did that, and then I passed quite nicely the rest of the year. So
the classical engineering schools back in the day, I've heard so many stories about many universities purposely trying to fill 2/3, and they say only 1/3 make it through to the next stage, combined with the classical university setting where everyone all of a sudden feels free and they want to party and they want to experience life. Oh my God, I remember all these days from my own university time. But yeah, I guess you persevered. I'm hearing similar trends to many others on the show. Good at mathematics, good at physics, so why don't you go for engineering? But I guess you had the additional aspect, which was opportunities. Netherlands constantly dealing with water challenges. Well, most of the country lying below the sea level. So yeah, I guess that was a perfect match. And I suppose you always thought, well, if you go into something with water, you might be able to go back to playing with fish and not eating them, protecting them as a result of that. So studies in civil engineering at TU Delft, and you finished in 2002 with a master's, and then decided to go to Sheffield for a PhD. So how did you make that jump?
Yeah, that was also quite a funny story, a typical academic story, because, I met Francois Clemens, who I guess is better known in the community, but he was my master supervisor. Mm-hmm. And again, I was sort of hesitant, but I kind of really liked the subject. It was sewers, and my family really mocked me relentlessly, and my friends as well, like the poo girl, whoever does, why on earth do you just study sewers? You must be crazy. But Francois' lectures were really inspiring and really interesting, and lots of real world examples of horrible things that can go wrong and how you better design a sewer system. And so I found that very interesting, and I was like, can I do my master dissertation with you? So I ended up doing the master dissertation with Francois Clemens. And then I wasn't sure what to do after. I had no idea because Delft is right next to Rotterdam, like I work in Rotterdam. And then Francois, again, he had a company. A lot of people went to work for the company he used to work, also part-time. He was part-time professor, part-time company. And then I was like, I also quite like this study. So I thought at some point, maybe I might do a PhD. But Francois didn't have any funding at the time. So he was like, well, you might have to go work for a year, and then we'll see if we find funding. And then as I was finishing off my dissertation, I was close to finishing, Francois had been to a conference, and he was like, I met this English professor who's he's got funding but no students, so you might want to talk with him. And I was always quite, English was also one of my favorite subjects in school, not just the maths and the physics. I kind of liked other things, and I liked English literature. I really got into that in school, and I loved going to England.
Any favorites, by the way?
Yeah, lots of things. I was... like any teenage girl, I love Wuthering Heights from the Emily Brontes and Jane Eyre, and the proper kind of exciting romantic sort of novels. And in the nature, in the moors, the nature in that. Ah,
yes, true.
The hills, and Rotterdam being a concrete jungle. I loved my summer holidays going out walking anywhere that was a little bit nature or wild. Or
I never got to Bronte or Austin.
But the bizarre thing was, and I was like, so where's this English professor? And he was like, it's in Bradford. And I'd never heard of Bradford, but it's like right next to where next to the moors, next to where the Bronte sisters, they lived very close to there. And I was like, and I had already been near there, and it was beautiful nature. Anyway, the bizarre thing was that I heard nothing. So I told my parents, and he was like, you're going to move to England for 3 years. And I was like, gosh, that's also a big step, but it might be quite exciting. It was only for 3 years. So, studying abroad always sounded also quite tempting or quite exciting, but I heard nothing for a while. And of course I was busy finishing my master. So I was like, I'll finish my master and then maybe have some weeks off and then decide what to do. And then I got an email, like maybe a couple of weeks later, from Professor Richard Ashley, who was in Bradford at the time, like, have you decided that? Do you still want to come? Have you decided yet? And I was like, I didn't know, because Francois was only in once a week. He was pretty busy, so I hadn't spoken to him for a week. And I was like, so what do I do now? He hadn't given me the contact details of this professor or anything, or told me what to do. And I was like, it's got like some more information or whatever. But yeah, I think the two of them had basically decided that would be a really good idea for me to go there, but then sort of forgot to tell me.
Oops.
So, and Richard Ashley, like, are you still, the email, I'm trying to remember, it was literally something like, are you still coming to England? And I was like, Francois, what does this mean? I had the job, or do I need to go there? And then eventually because Simon Tate at the time, when I was doing my master's, he was in Sheffield at the time. He was doing some experiments in Deltaris, and Francois just sent me there to go and speak to these people, maybe help them. You know how you think a master's student, you can help you. Yeah. We've got a master's student to help you. And then, of course, I didn't realize, so I'd met Simon, but he was in Sheffield, and the PhD was with Richard in Bradford. So that was also a different name. So I thought originally it might be with Simon. So I didn't even know who Richard Ashley was either. No idea.
And
you get this email out of the blue, and I was totally confused. It's typical academic. I mean, after so many, that's 23 years, I completely understand how that happened, because you're just so busy as an academic and distracted. And sometimes you think you've told somebody, but you haven't. So I can see how that happened. But it was quite funny. So in the end, I found some funding for me to go and discuss some of the data analysis I'd been helping with. So I had a look at Sheffield. I have a look at Bradford as well. Not at Bradford, I don't think. So I'd never even been there when I came there.
But eventually it worked out.
It worked out. It was a bit of a shock to the system as well, because I arrived in Bradford and it was 2 years after the Bradford riots.
Okay.
And it's quite a poor town. It's got really nice things in the center. It's surrounded by beautiful nature, but it's also got quite dilapidated housing areas, quite close to the university. And Netherlands is quite well organized and definitely richer. And I really noticed the difference. Streets with boarded up houses and everything.
I guess, that confusion would also come from the geography. Just preparing for this episode, I had to go and refresh my geography of the UK, in England in particular. And it's very polycentric. I mean, you got London, which everyone sort of knows where it's placed. But then, Bradford, Sheffield, then you have Birmingham, Manchester. They're all kind of clustered and sort of a bit equidistant to each other. So I can imagine the level of confusion. But either way, you got there and you then ventured deeper into urban drainage, into sewers, and I guess just understanding the system more. Did marine biology still feature anywhere in your mind at the time, or were you so fascinated by the more technical aspect and trying to solve it for environmental benefit?
Yeah, at that point, I was just interested in how can we make sewer systems operate better.
And that's something that I think that's been front and center of everyone's mind. And so one tool of trade that you use was modeling. And, we use a lot of models because they help us understand the system better. And in particular, you focus on the one hand, the holistic aspects, so trying to integrate models across the system, but also on uncertainties in particular. And I guess trying to figure out where to start, I figured uncertainties they're a topic that have been mentioned in passing on the show, but it's not something that we've really thought about deeply. Definitely worth going into. Let's do a bit of a 101 there. So, I mean, how would you, define uncertainty? And there's a lot of terminology around it, but to you, why is it important?
Yeah, I think it's important because you have models that are used for quite a few different purposes, either for designing the sewer systems or for checking how a system operates against regulations as well, or to help you understand the system. Mm-hmm. So you don't use it for design, but to try and work out what the processes are. But a lot of decisions get taken on this, especially the models used for design. And I guess for sewer design, it's not like I just design one building on the top from scratch. But you have to fit often. Maybe if you have a storage tank, you have to fit it in an existing system. So you really need to understand your existing system and then model it with your design placed to see what the effect is on the existing system and how much you've been able to approve it, and if it then still would pass whatever your local regulation is. And then I realized that it was something Francois hammered into us when I did the year 4 and 5 modules with him, and that you really need to understand what is happening, and if not, you can make your design really fail or operate badly. And there were quite some examples that people don't really, because this is not the researchers that maybe know unless you talk to practitioners, and they don't like to talk about this. But there are already quite some examples of, for example, storage tanks being filled with sediment and actually making things worse rather than better. And so they wouldn't have any storage, and when they would fill, they'd flush the polluted sediment out. Or tanks being built for hundreds of thousands or millions of pounds or euros or guilders at the time in the Netherlands. And just being built in the wrong place. And also such a waste of money and resources. And if we'd put more effort or more care in the modeling, we could have avoided those things.
Not to forget the reason why sewers were built in the first place, to solve a public health crisis. And when you think, the greatest medical advancement of the 20th century, we find that published in a biomedical journal, is the sewer system or the whole sanitary system. We are also transporting material, whether it's water or sediment, as you said, that contain a lot of contamination, a lot of viruses, pathogens that can make people sick. And if the decisions are not good and these things spill either out into the open or into a river, the consequences are pretty far-reaching. So, and I guess you use models because often these are thousands of kilometers of just pipe networks that are conveying water on a daily basis. As soon as you flush your toilet, that goes into the sewer system and it has to reach a treatment plant eventually. And if you add another building like you just described, you could be putting more water into the system at the wrong times, causing all sorts of issues.
Yeah, that's also in the UK. Like until the big floods of 2007 beforehand, project developers who just had the automatic right to connect to the existing sewer system.
Without any prior approval, just...
Yeah, they had the automatic right to connect, which is of course how we got into all the lots of combined sewer overflow spills in various areas because people just kept adding bits to an existing system, which thankfully, especially like in London, I did my PhD in the sewer system there. It was a good job. The Victorians really over-designed it, which meant it took, 80 or 90 years to realize that actually it was completely full or over capacity.
The classical engineering thinking, which nowadays we can't really use anymore because there's so much uncertainty, back to the topic, I guess, around it. We know climate is changing, but also we are not sure how the urbanization may look like. Areas also get redeveloped, densification also being a thing because we don't want to encroach too much onto nature. People talk about compact cities, but we often forget that this kind of critical infrastructure needs to also be adapted as a result of that. And so this brings us to the uncertainties. With every decision, there's always this level of uncertainty. So, unsureness. But if we unpack that a bit more, that can occur in many different areas. I guess starting at for those who want the most public example of what uncertainty is, people always refer back to Donald Rumsfeld's famous briefing on February 12th, 2002. And this was about the whole issue with Iraq having weapons of mass destruction and whether we know that for certain or not, to use similar terms. I quote directly from the report. So he said in his briefing that reports that say that something hasn't happened are always interesting to me because, as we know, they are known knowns. They are things we know. We also know they are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know, but they are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know. And if one looks throughout the history of our country and other free countries, it is the latter category that tends to be the difficult ones. To break this down, he sort of highlights these known knowns, these known unknowns, and these unknown unknowns. And there's different elements of uncertainties around the unknowns here. I mean, that's sort of been one of the ways we teach uncertainty, at least back in my day when I brought it into different lectures. But, how do you navigate that? How do you define it?
Yeah, it's quite tricky because if you go into uncertainty papers, there's quite different definitions and people can get a bit upset when I talk about the accuracy in a sensor. It's like, oh no, you can describe it with a probability distribution. That means it's not unknown. It just has a probability. Personally, I still call it uncertainty as well, just to communicate it wider. For a scientific publication, you want to make sure you really define what you mean by uncertainty, because it can come in so many different levels, because there's the unknown unknowns, and there's you call it deep uncertainty or other, there's things like climate change. So I guess by now we know it's happening, but it's still pretty hard to model what's happened. But you have it on a far more basic level. You install a sensor, and the sensor might have, plus or minus 1 milligram per liter, or plus or minus whatever, so milliliter per second accuracy range. So it's a range. It's not a single number. And of course, when I started, all the design models, they were deterministic. So they wouldn't take any kind of probability into account.
An input gives an output.
So one input, one output. Yeah. So there was the famous paper from Patrick Willems on water quality model, or a random number generator, when he realized you compare the water quality model with a random number generator and it gives the same sort of results.
Which is kind of scary.
Well, it's especially when you think people then, based on a design where they would have used the water quality model, they put several 100,000 or maybe even £1 million storage tank or a new part of the system in. And I was like, when I do my PhD, well, that can't be right. So I really I did kind of a basic, but making sure I understood it, because you have model structure uncertainty as well, based on, how you describe physically a system, and what are the processes to put in and the processes to ignore. But I started much more basic, just sort of putting these varied input parameters in, and then do Monte Carlo simulation, see what the outputs are, and draw some nice probability curves, as in, I have a probability of this much sediment coming out, or a probability of this much CSO spill. So once you have a probability, you can then link it to your design. I can design something that has an 80% probability of satisfying your regulation, or 90%.
And so for those who love frameworks, you've kind of touched upon a few very interesting, let's call it sources of uncertainty. So on the one hand, you have your data. No measurement is perfect. We design these devices and generally they give us a good idea. People have called that aleatoric uncertainty or noise, measurement errors or sampling errors. And there's usually some level of understanding there because, people have tested sensors over and over and over again. But then there's also the uncertainties in the model structure. There's a famous quote, Box and Draper, I think it was 1976, where they said all models are wrong, but some are useful. In fact, even earlier, I found a quote that I really liked, and that was from John von Neumann, very famous scientist and mathematician. Truth is much too complicated to allow anything but approximations. And that is really what modeling is. We are trying to simplify the system to its fundamental parts that we need, or the essentials, so that we can predict things and forecast things, I guess, in a short amount of time. And then you also mentioned this idea of deep uncertainty. And that's really the very difficult epistemic level where we have that lack of knowledge, but also just the inability to know what's going to happen in the future. I think people love to predict the future. And, that's often very dangerous. And so Monte Carlo has been one of the ways we try to deal with it, where we simulate and run the model many times, I guess, changing things, because we're now moving away from deterministic input, output to something that's a bit more broader, so we can see what happens if something changes or what happens if we consider certain errors. Is this something that people are able to embrace, they're able to understand? Because I feel like people like to make decisions based on a certain level of certainty. For lack of better word combinations.
Yeah, this is where we really struggle. You say we are moving towards this, but then we might mean academics. If you look on the ground, well, people, when they do a design, they always go through a few scenarios, but nowhere near something like a full Monte Carlo analysis. And of course, engineers like to just put a safety factor on it. So you look climate change, and in the end, you look at the number of guidance, it's just like, you go plus 30% or plus 40% or something. And it's become really quite hard to actually, because this is where you get into regulation and the way the local regulatory system works. Because if I speak to people in a water utility, which I study these models and I explain what we're doing, they understand this. But then the economic regulator at the moment, it's going to change. I don't know exactly how. They have this you have one shot at it to build something.
Yeah, because it sits there for the next 50 years.
No, it's also because the water companies in England, every 5 years, they make their price review. And then Ofwat decides how much water bills they can charge. Mm-hmm. And then they work out, we need so many solutions built here. But basically, once they build one solution, that's it. They can't go back to Ofwat to ask for more money for an extension. So we all talk about adaptive design and so on, and have more adaptability. But the regulatory system is kind of at the moment not really allowing that. So I can say, why don't you build something that has maybe 8% probability of solving your problem when you have all these uncertainties? And then you save money, but also you might then have the money to maybe build 2 solutions rather than 1.
And you mentioned Ofwat, I guess, for the listeners who are not as familiar with some of the UK services. So Ofwat is the Water Services Regulation Authority. So they're a non-ministerial government department, and they're responsible for a lot of these economic regulations. And I guess they work together with many of the other stakeholders in the water sector to then manage that more at the economic level.
Yeah, because the problem that we have now, we explain things and the people on the ground, they understand full well that there's this uncertainty. But it's like, once we have a design, we cannot come back to it.
That's true.
So you have all these nice ideas of maybe build a more adaptive design, like a smaller tank, or then you add maybe blue-green infrastructure, or you add something else later when you understand more.
Incremental
changes, but that really doesn't work well with the current regulatory system. It sort of blocks that at the moment.
It's very difficult to get people to embrace this more broader, flexible thinking, because people like to make a sound decision. They like to be confident in it, when they don't realize that having a good understanding of what the uncertainties are actually increases their confidence, because then they can anticipate potential outcomes that are not so favorable and then adapt. And this brings in another set of 4 different terms that we often see in the literature around uncertainty. Namely, you have quantitative uncertainty, so those things that you can model and can quantify. You've got scenario uncertainty, so what may happen, in which direction can it go. But then they also call the other 2 categories qualitative uncertainty, which is much more I guess, for lack of a better term, esoteric, where it's very difficult to understand even more of the possibilities that could happen. And the last one, which I just like, the word is ignorance, which is really these unknown unknowns. And so, I guess you're dealing with this ongoing battle between trying to convince someone that knowing the uncertainty actually builds confidence, whereas they're saying, well, actually, no, we'd rather be, fully confident, and ignorance may be the best road to take. Seems like a bit of a headache there.
It definitely is, yeah, because I can see I don't agree with all the all the ideas of what the way it's currently happening, but on the other hand, they do have some sort of a point, and that's something I've really been thinking of more recently in like a reputation of the water utilities and the trust that the public has in them, because we can think this adaptive is better. Yeah. But then what they also come with, and the water companies, they come with some very practical things that I think we should really think about. They're like, but if we build one tank or one solution, one blue-green infrastructure, and we build another one there 5 years later, people think we had it wrong. Yeah. And we have to break open the road twice, and people get annoyed by that. And then they think, why didn't you design it correctly in the first place?
Yeah, that is true.
So on a practical level, there's quite some...
I guess people like the build it and forget it, or set it and forget it kind of mentality.
That's very much the current mindset.
And to bring it back more to, I guess, a physical system, and one that you've been dealing with, you've mentioned this already, these are the combined sewer overflows. Yes. So for those who don't really know, in a combined system which drains both the wastewater and the stormwater when it rains, you tend to have these structures along the network that buffer a lot of that flow, because you think about it, you design a sewer system to carry a certain flow, and you make it slightly bigger so that when it rains to a certain degree, it can actually convey all that water. But sometimes it rains far too much. And so you have these buffering structures. I guess they're giant tanks, if I had to, or giant structured pits with lots of volume.
Well, they're usually just like an emergency overflow.
Yeah.
They're not, a lot of them won't have any tanks. They're just a side weir, and then it will go, in England, always go past the screen straight in the river.
Okay.
So they're not necessarily also in other parts of Europe, because I've been studying them quite a lot recently. There's many also without any storage.
Oh, wow. Believe it or not, having been in Australia for so long and studying all my water engineering there, I've never actually been to a CSO structure. I've always seen all the other things. I've been to plenty of treatment plants, but nothing along the sewer. So if I take a trip up to England, I'll have to ask you to take me out for a site visit. But nevertheless, these are there to relieve also the treatment plant from a huge influx of water, because you need to maintain a certain flow there so that the treatment actually works. And so, combined sewer overflows, in a traditional sense, you normally manage the entire network to reduce the number of spills they have. And also, in terms of frequency, so how often they spill, but also how much of it spills. That determines often the size and location of these systems. But it feels like it's one number on both indicators.
Well, at the moment, actually, the CSOs aren't really managed. They're just designed. They're not actually managed in most cases.
Okay.
So they're just originally put there. So what is the design? You work out how much inflow your wastewater treatment plant can handle. So you just put all your weir settings so that anything above that will just spill.
Okay.
It's in most places in England, for sure, it's a gravity-driven system in many places. I mean, in Netherlands, it's a little bit different. It'll be more managed because there'll be lots of pumps.
Yeah.
So they either pump, because it's so flat, either it gets pumped to the treatment plant or it gets pumped into the river.
Yeah. And so set it and forget it. I guess they really just leave it there. And to design it, I suppose we go back to the models. You have the models that can simulate the entire system.
But the CSOs are there before the models.
True.
The CSOs would have been designed with very just plain equations or even just knowledge. So I looked a lot into CSO design across Europe for part of the CoUDLabs project. But a lot of the CSOs, many of them can be like decades old.
Okay.
They would have been built like when treatment plants were built. So a lot of them were built well before we had any design models. Just very simple like things you could more or less do on paper.
Back of the envelope even.
Yeah, some of the earliest CSOs. I think there's one, I found a nice paper Jörg Wiekerman sent me from 1915.
Okay.
On it.
Yeah, I guess computers weren't exactly the best then.
And of course, when they were built, then they would just have a certain setting so as not to overload your treatment plant.
Yeah.
And then they would have been forgotten about for decades with all this extra urbanization, extra people, and now climate change. I mean, in the UK in the 1990s, they redesigned a lot of them because they already had problems then, and then not a lack of money. So that's why a lot of people now blame the UK CSO problem on privatization, but people forget privatization was done in the first place because the local authorities didn't have enough money, because a lot of rivers are very, very dirty.
Yeah.
And bad water quality treatment plants also not able to cope. So they actually privatized in order to raise money to make improvements.
But I guess private investors then providing infrastructure for public good.
Well, they provide the funds. They just raise the... because what I hear now is almost here a number of countries really struggling still with the implementation, especially in Eastern Europe, of the first Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive.
Okay.
Still struggling to raise the funds. Because people aren't used to paying a lot of money for water and water treatment.
And it can be quite costly, especially the operation and maintenance of the systems as time passes. I mean, I'm thinking back to episode 13 with Veljko Prodanovic, who told us the story of Belgrade, and that they don't actually have a treatment plant because the Danube and the Sava confluence, the flows are so strong in the Danube that any water gets mixed in. And, the famous saying, dilution is the solution to pollution, was very much in people's minds back in the day as well, thinking that if you have plenty of water, then it's not going to be a public health problem at all.
Yeah, and back in the day, it was quite an efficient, reasonable, pragmatic solution.
Until you densify. And
until you get lots more and more people, more and more wastewater. And also different things in your wastewater.
And so you have models that can at least simulate the system and in a way that helps. But there's one other word, and it's also front and center of everyone's minds, and that is monitoring. Models are only as good as the data that is used to calibrate them. We are in a world of uncertainty, and monitoring has been done in a very piecemeal way. Not much has been in place. There's not many systems in place, let alone all the sensor uncertainties as well. That's quite a lot of effort to understand the equipment. We're talking about the world of digitalization, digital twins. People are starting to think of these kinds of smart devices that collect data of our system to help us better understand it. But what's the status? You mentioned that CSOs are put in place and then forgotten.
Yes, so I guess there was always... You mean CSO monitoring? Yeah, there was always...
generally everything.
Yeah, so they put in place and forgotten. But of course, once the water quality gets too bad, people start to notice.
True.
So I suppose this is what happened in the UK already quite a while ago. And we had lots of lobbying groups starting to complain about their local water quality. And that then led, is quite an unusual way, it led in 2013 to Benyon MP actually making a ministerial direction, which is a very unusual move. So he basically thought we should do this, and the parliament agreed, and then this happened.
Okay.
So he just said we should monitor this all. So there would have been a long lobby before that.
But it seems like there's been a push now, given the public perception as well. Because you have to imagine CSOs, when they spill, it's raw sewage, so whatever comes from your house, maybe sometimes mixed with rainwater, going straight into your local river. And I mean, that will look bad. Yeah,
well, I think that's maybe one of the things you won't see, because that's, again, something maybe particular to UK. I mean, it is mostly raw sewage, but in the 90s, they put screens everywhere.
Oh.
So actually all the visible stuff gets filtered out.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yes.
Which is also terrible, because some of the things that are even worse for you, you often don't see. So the pathogens and all the nutrients as well, and the consequences of that. But monitoring, of course, becoming very important. You were part of an interesting study around data and data around these CSOs in particular, whether we publish this kind of data, make it open, so that, I guess, it's on the one hand being transparent about management of these systems, but on the other hand also sharing data across countries to better understand how to improve these systems, especially in times of uncertainty. What were some of the interesting insights?
Yeah, there's quite a few, actually. I quite enjoyed this study. This is the most recent paper, I guess, I wrote. And it was for many decades. I had my PhD students more recently writing a paper with me supervising. But here there was not that much funding, and we really wanted to do this. So I actually had to write well, with the help of a lot of others, write it myself.
But always good to revisit the writing process.
Yes, it was good. It was a lot of information because I was really interested in, because the data was made open in the UK, and that led to what we like to call the shitstorm in lots of negative media. So the data just got put as a big CSV file that the Environment Agency just literally put public.
With no context.
With no context,
Oh,
nothing
geez.
whatsoever.
Oh, no.
And then the NGOs, some of them that had been lobbying for years to improve water quality, kind of took it and made nice visualizations of it. For example, the Rivers Trust was the first one, but you see more different NGOs, different versions of this map and this information appearing as well. And then the journalists and again, the local action groups and lobby groups really fell on this, and he had really horrible newspaper headlines and a lot of negative press, and the public really lost trust. So I think in the end, the whole idea was it is good to show open data, because once you put it in, you can start and you then maybe try to improve things. You can show improvement and you can educate people, like basically you don't want to swim here after a heavy rainfall.
Yep.
But yeah, it's sort of somehow horrifically backfired. That there's a really bad trust in the water companies in England is absolute rock bottom.
Note to self, if you ever publish data, please publish metadata and please be careful.
Well, not just metadata and explanation of the
course.
history, because that got me interested. Like, people need to understand that this problem has been in the making for like 100 years.
Yeah.
It's not something we can solve next year.
True. And in a way, you provide a positive example in that paper as well, whereas in Brussels, they actually took a collaborative approach with citizen groups. And so they provided that explanation, and I guess they guided people through understanding that data, so that people didn't go and start to, I guess, tweak the data to serve the message, because that's often a very dangerous undertaking.
Yeah, so there's a nice website there from an NGO, and they do lots of like river cleanup. And they are also, of course, not happy about all the sewage, but it's like a positive. They link through like initiatives. There was like a local funding to install a water butt. So that NGO had that on their website. Now install a water butt, help reduce CSOs, and lots of actions, and it all in a positive note. And of course, in England, for example, I live in Yorkshire. Yorkshire Water also has similar initiatives like install a water, but water saving device, or try not to pave over your drive, make sure this is permeable. And then if you look on some of the social media feed, there's still lots of people like, oh, I loved making your little rain gauges with my kids. But there's also lots of horrible, like, we pay you to solve this problem. Why should we solve your problem kind of thing? Why am I supposed to water but it's your job to solve this problem. You made this problem. It's incredibly unhelpful. You can see some horrific stuff on the...
Yeah. It's hard to appeal to everyone. And I guess people have to also better understand the system to then maybe realize why these initiatives exist in the first place. And yeah, you're always going to have those that don't want to contribute to it because they are paying. They feel like their investment into the utilities should go a long way. And then you have others that understand it and actually want to take a certain stewardship. And I guess that's something that has popped up a few times, also in previous episodes, also particularly around blue-green infrastructures. And yeah, it's something, once you get the people on board, often things are easier, but it's not easy to get everyone on board.
Yeah, but I think also in the UK, I think the way they publish the data and then the way the press and some action groups ran with it is now sort of hampering this getting the people on board, because they don't trust the water companies at all. And they also have something like, oh, why should we do this?
Yeah. And how do you think we should rebuild the trust?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a long process. I'm trying to hopefully get some more research funding to collaborate with social scientists or communication. So I guess it'll be hard to get funding for that. But I'm really hoping to get some more research going in a collaboration with, I call it social scientists. As an engineer myself, they're probably much more detailed experts out there.
They often say we have all the technology to solve the problems. And usually the challenge is more either getting the public, so the social science, or the economic. And it seems like in this case, it's really the social science.
It's really the public. Yeah, because when I see that is Virgil Sharkey, he was like a famous sort of controversy. Hey, you can look him up. He's from the 1980s.
Okay.
I remember the song. Oh, you can look it up anyway. It was a good heart.
Okay, we'll look
anyway,
it up.
It's this 1980s pop singer that I think must also like fishing or something. And he's very vocal. He's got 200,000 followers on Twitter. But for example, last year, my colleagues, we ran the Pipe Pots project. So that was like a research project. But then afterwards in the UK, you can get quite some industrial sort of applied funding to then bring your research into practice, which I think is a really good thing, because you have the famous valley of death between research and application. But that means, for example, I and my colleagues, we all have had a lot of funding for water companies. And I hear Jörg and others speaking to, we had a journalist on the line. We all hide under our desk when there's a journalist because they know we've been funded by water companies and they have all the trust. So we are basically now seen as, I haven't actually tried. Liz still tells me that I need to make a conversation article or something. But I'm just worried because I think they probably think that I say whatever the water company wants me to say because of the funding through them. It's probably not the case.
It's the same like tobacco companies funding scientists to say that the tobacco products are actually okay, they're not bad for your health, or soft drink companies saying these drinks are healthy, because they contain vitamins.
Exactly,
apart from the kilos of sugar.
But we have to work with the water companies to properly understand their system. We have to work with their operators. So, coming back to Virgil Sharkey and my colleagues, so they had this Ofwat innovation fund to make some of there's the Pipebots project where they developed inspection robots so we could do more proactive repair of the sewer system, see where there's breakages to repair it before spills or flooding occur. Yeah. And then they got this funding and there was a big headline on Twitter and in the newspaper, like Thames Water, the failing company, got so much public money, stupidity more like, I can send you the link after. But it was a horrific, and he has the 200,000 followers. And it was this horrific, like, we shouldn't give them this money. And so it's like, now the news is going against innovation. We need this partnership with the water companies to get our research into practice. And
I think sometimes in a world of, people call it post-truth, and maybe it's something we don't get into too deeply here, but you can look it up, listeners. I think the rise of social media has really shifted the way we, I guess, understand and look at truth. But I feel like in the world of post-truth, we still have to push through with, some of the things we do understand and try to manage it as best as we can along the way. And hopefully, the outcomes are positive on the technical basis and people start to see that and change their opinions. I feel like opinion changes can be a strategy. So I guess fight the storm, go straight through it and then come out better. And hopefully people see the benefits from it. I don't know. I mean, it's a very tricky road that we're navigating, especially because the systems are getting more complex. You've thrown in blue-green infrastructures every now and then. Decentralized combined with centralized changes the dynamic of the system completely. But I guess where we're at here, when we were discussing some of these issues, you mentioned the UK Environment Act and CSOs and the management around them are changing. Whereas we used to use models to help us understand the system because we didn't monitor as much. Now it seems like people are trusting this modeling less and wanting to do more monitoring.
Yeah, and I can see why, because I guess you have to model, build reports from the water utilities, or the water companies, they would not be openly available. And I think people just don't trust what the water companies are doing anymore. And so they wanted to see the monitoring open for everyone to see.
Because then they see the data coming in.
They can see data.
They can understand it more.
But then that's kind of, instead of fostering trust, the way in which the data was opened has made the trust literally hit rock bottom, unfortunately.
Yeah. So many things to, I guess, look out for whether you're doing a model or you're trying to publish data. So it's, I guess, a tricky road. But where do you stand on monitoring versus models? I think we need a balance of both, right?
Yeah, we need a balance of both. I think we really do need the monitoring. And I think it does help eventually, even though in the UK there's quite a lot of repair of trust to be done now. But it helps when everyone, I think, can see directly what is happening or can help. And in the end, I guess not that many people might really look at this, but you have local action groups that do definitely look and scrutinize this data. Yeah, I think it can help people see why maybe they don't want to pave over their drive, but put some gravel or something else, or why installing a water but is useful.
And I guess data is often very expensive to get. Whereas models, you can just pull one off the shelf and try to run it, of course.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thought I got during this conference, that people in England complain, and I think we should go back to nationalize the water utilities. And I think at this stage, we're here now, I'm not sure that's going to solve the problem, that we have actually had a lot of money available in the UK. I mean, okay, unfortunately, a lot seems to have gone to shareholders in dubious ways, but a lot has also gone in the system, because I didn't realize until watching some presentations, there's a lot of data being put in the UK. There's now the data for monitoring the combined sewer overflows. There's going to be more monitors put in, but also for the models that were built in the UK, they were not pulled off the shelf. They used to put what they call short-term flow surveys in.
Okay.
But they used to actually, it is common. There's a guidance online freely available for everyone to see. And actually the prescription is to put one rain gauge per 1 or 2 square kilometer and a flow monitor at every point. So for a model the size of a big city, if it is being built, and InfoWorks is like the standard tool for these models, it's normal to put in maybe 200, 300 flow monitors until you have 3 storms of a specific size, which can take anywhere between 2-3 months to up to a year. And I saw this presented here as new, and I'm like, but that's common practice. And yes, it is actually expensive. Of course it is.
And people don't really, just to, I guess, enlighten you a bit, listeners, when we think of models, especially in the water sector, there's also considerations around, what kind of rainstorms do we use? And do we use actual data? Do we use a synthetic kind of rain that we envision is like the worst kind of storm for a certain return period? They talk about the 1 in 100 year, which doesn't necessarily mean that it comes once every 100 years. So, if you heard Alma just now, probability, very important to think about. But there's so many considerations there. And when it comes to getting the real data, you're getting data in different areas. You have to measure the rain, you have to measure the flows, just to make sure that the model works properly as well, and that you get some reasonable thing. The famous saying, garbage in, garbage out. Very much true for any kind of model, even in AI. If you don't give AI a good piece of information or good training data, you also get garbage, call it that.
Yeah, so actually the UK sewer models, a lot of money goes into them. So they tend to use this short-term flow surveys where they have rain gauges, so they're also using radar data nowadays as well. And then they verify the model against like maybe several hundreds of flow monitors.
Yeah.
And using like measured rainfall events in just to see if the model is doing what it should be doing.
Yeah.
So of course they're not perfect, but they're not that bad either.
That's true. We have fundamental knowledge to build these models. Of course, then you need to think about cities all being different to each other. And oftentimes we use similar mathematical relationships, and there are a lot of models out there which have a certain set of equations. But I think one very famous worry we have is that nobody ever really questions these kinds of equations and whether they make sense. Half of them are actually directly informed by the data. So data from one city would just be used to make an equation that is used in another city. That sounds dangerous.
Yeah, there's a nice example that I found when I studied really deeply the model uncertainty and all the equations behind InfoWorks. There are some quite dubious. This is when I was doing the sediment transport equations in there, they are very empirical. And I realized that, and other people as well at the time, the people were using it outside the original bounds for different particle sizes, for example.
Oh, wow.
Or we also have the new UK runoff. Now we have a newer runoff, but at the time I studied, you had what's called the new UK runoff model for runoff from permeable areas into your network model. And I think I found the original 1980s or 90s conference paper making that model. And I spoke to some of the people involved, and they were like, oh yeah, that was just 5 areas where we did some brief research working out. And one of them was a building yard. Now, one of them was like, so there was these 5 or 6 areas which they used to develop this new UK runoff model, which is an empirical runoff model for permeable areas. And one of them was a yard where a school used to practice building.
Oh, wow.
So they used to pave it with this and then pave it with that, apparently.
So once you find out the truth behind how all this work came about, you start to sweat and you start to get worried.
Yeah.
And InfoWorks is not just widely used in the UK, but also across Europe. And in working with some engineers, they say, we're going to spin up the InfoWorks model and create one for this design. And when you start to realize you have these softwares and the assumption is just simply that you can transfer them to other cities, uncertainty plays a bigger role again. So I guess, all in all, we've had a very lengthy discussion around this, this issue of models, monitoring data, uncertainties. But what are your hopes in rebuilding that trust? I guess what are some of the first steps you hope to take and that you hope the community takes?
Yeah, I was kind of hoping to really try collaborate more with social science into how we communicate this uncertainty. Because I guess in the UK, it's real time. Whether or not there has been a spill in the last few days, data is open for all the CSOs, as well as the yearly duration and frequency of CSOs for every structure is openly available. But they're going to have the Environment Act you mentioned. The plan is in about 3 years to also start monitoring water quality with online sons upstream and downstream of every CSO and make that open as well. And that really worries me because Of course, the data
experience.
although some people wouldn't call this uncertainty, but probably I still call it uncertainty. But you can still, but there's lots of errors in your data if maybe it's not maintained well. But even if everything is maintained perfectly, your sensor still has a range of accuracy.
True.
Yeah, it's always that value plus or minus so many percent or so much milligram per liter. And of course, now we can start to see if that data goes public as well. Of course, there'll be big chance that maybe one sensor is broken, or you might start to see different things than you expect in your water quality and your CSO. And I think then the trust, if you don't communicate that well, I'm sure the trust will go even further down the drain.
And people will remember past experiences. Although on a previous episode with Patrick Cuervo, we were talking about floods. There seems to be this threshold beyond which people tend to forget, certain events that happened. I don't know if this applies to these kinds of outrages, but, you never know. So I guess extra care. And I suppose also, collaboration with other researchers also tackling these similar problems. You mentioned CoUDLabs, a very successful project that recently concluded as well, where you had lots of exchange between academics across Europe, practitioners, I guess exchange of data as well. And so projects like that hopefully keep sprouting up in the future to ensure that you have this knowledge exchange, so that outcomes like tools like InfoWorks will be catered better to the local context.
Yeah, and I also really hope that people will just keep communicating better. I still am in big favor of opening the data, but people will just, I'm hoping as engineers, we take far more care really reaching out to local action groups or local NGOs, river custodian groups, social science, to try how we actually communicate this better in a way that is helpful, because there's some law of unintended consequences now ongoing in England. This data was made open after, I'm sure, people lobbying and wanting this information, that the press is now so bad that the government wants to see quick solutions to the CSO problem. And there's a nice, also in the Institution of Civil Engineers, is this nice small article. Of course, we want more blue-green infrastructure, but that will take much longer to plan and install than a great big storage tank. So, and although with the best of intentions, there were local river custodian groups and other groups that wanted better water quality, in some cases, we do need a big storage tank. If the system is overloaded and it's highly dense, we simply don't have enough space to put enough blue-green infrastructure to bring down the CSO. So we kind of need storage tanks as well. We very likely need both. But really the focus is kind of mostly on also building big tanks and building it fast, which means the models might well be rushed. There's not enough skilled people even to build these models. If you go in the UK, so anybody out there that's a sewer modeler, you can get a job in the UK. There's lots of vacancies out there because there's simply not enough people able to do this. So the worry I have is that people are going to rush through these models and designs and build big tanks that, because the models and the designs has been rushed through, maybe not operate well. And then you put a huge amount of concrete in the ground and carbon. If we taken this somewhat slower approach, we might have had a much more cost-efficient, better solutions to increase the water quality, because it takes carbon to build these solutions as well.
True. And I guess, the climate uncertainty, you might put it in now, and then the weather shifts completely. Climate shifts completely, and they just don't work as intended in even just a year's time from then. But I guess very difficult, tricky field to navigate, but hopefully this will start to take a turn for the better. And I suppose marine biology could be helpful here, because I know stories from Melbourne in the Yarra River where the minute people started seeing fish or even seals come into the city, people started appreciating the fact that something was improving. So perhaps that's also another link.
And when you looked up the Gen Alpha, I do wonder, I should really start to have some urban drainage knitting group with Generation Z or Alpha or something to try and understand the social media, because I think it'd be much better. And with the JCUD as well, we had some...
The Joint Committee on Urban Drainage.
The Joint Committee of Urban Drainage. We was like, we really want to spread wide. So we already last time had some younger and enthusiastic members. And I was like, we need to have a better sort of advertisement for JCUD. So I made some text and people fed into it, and we had quite a nice advert.
Nice.
And social media people put it on LinkedIn and various places, and we had so much more applications than we expected. So it's like, really need to collaborate with people that know. Because I'm still useless at social media. As I said, I just like to switch off. And I'm not on Twitter, I'm not on Instagram, I'm not on Facebook.
But still.
Not on TikTok.
You try your best. Your best. And when you said urban drainage knitting group, I thought you were going to knit some plush plush toy CSOs and other stuff. But okay, that is a much better idea. And so what's your future plan? You actually recently are starting up a new project, also in sewer systems, but in something completely different. It's a project called Torch.
Yeah, so this is a project on helping to decide where to put in sewer heat recovery systems.
So not just the water, now
not
the heat.
just the water, heat. Yeah, so again, it's looking at the environment to make use of waste heat. So overall, we have less carbon emissions. That's the idea. Because of course, we use a lot of warm water in the shower and in washing and dishwashing and all sorts, and it just goes down the drain. And the idea is not new of sewer heat recovery. Yeah. And there's some, like in Switzerland and now in Scotland, there's some systems, but they're not as widespread as we think they could be and should be. And there's now, we did a European project on this 10 years ago. Yep. Where we already saw the opportunities of this, and other people have as well, but we really struggled to implement it. But now is again somehow the regulation or the legislation is helping us. They're really encouraging heat networks in the UK and sort of multiple source. Because historically you might have had a heat network where you have like a big steel plant or a big waste incinerator, but maybe not something that's necessarily next to a big city to make use of the waste heat. But the big concern of carbon and oil prices, lower grade heat is becoming more attractive and interesting. So a water company kind of knocked our door as in, didn't you do heat recovery and heat modeling like so many years ago? And so they wanted this project to help make like some kind of a decision support, sort of a system to map where is the heat and where can we take it out. Because you have to be careful. If you take out too much heat close to the treatment plant, you will damage the operation. The treatment plant needs a minimum temperature to operate.
Yeah, because you kind of have to have that water at a certain temperature so the chemical processes and the biological processes can run better. But when you think about it, district heating often then tends to be, you produce that, I guess, somewhere and you have to direct that heat throughout the city, whereas the sewer network's just beneath you.
Yeah, so these are a bit not like the traditional district heating, but they're like low-grade heat systems that are really being encouraged. Definitely by the UK government now. Yeah,
and I guess similar to when we think about using food waste for heating, something that was also discussed on the podcast just only a few episodes ago. You don't necessarily need to heat something to over 100 degrees or to burn things at very high temperatures. Oftentimes, you have the temperature you need for your house right beneath your feet. And geothermal energy, I guess, has been looking at this as well with heat pumps where you can extract it. Would the heat at the depth of where the sewer pipes are normally stabilized, and would the heat be retained well, or does a lot of it get lost?
It does also, I guess, gets lost in the underground and in the air above the sewer. So it's one of my former PhD students who is now quite cool to see. He's now a lecturer in Exeter. It's nice to see your PhD students
it's a lovely moment.
Grow up. But so he is also involved in this project because it was his PhD to develop the model with the heat exchanges. But it's hard to quantify. There's not that many measurements. So we worked together with Aquafin at the time. So we had some temperature measures in the soil and in the water. But there's a field that's been hard for us to get funding because there's not that much data really on both temperature in the air above the sewer, in the sewer and in the soil to really start to understand the thermodynamics. And also hydraulics is my background, not thermodynamics.
I hear thermodynamics is worse than in terms of uni. They really push you and the math is more complicated.
And I never did that sort of stuff in my undergraduate. But anyway, we're getting... and it's been interesting because it's been hard to actually find funding for that because you keep thinking this should be much more widely used. Heat just goes down the drain and we can use this and save carbon. And then we had that European project 10 years ago. But it's only because like the government now suddenly starts pushing something that the water company is worried that people start to just be allowed to take the heat and mess up the treatment plant that they actually got interested in applying for Ofwat, and that Ofwat actually funded this. This was an Ofwat innovation fund.
So coming straight from the economic regulator.
Yes.
And I guess they see a business case, and I suppose the keyword net zero is taking shape everywhere in the world.
Yeah, it comes from there's guidance from the Department of Net Zero, who we used Mohammed's PhD material in their guidance, but simplified it quite badly, I have to say. And that worried really the water company. Like, somebody might just go in and take our heat without us knowing whether it damages other things. And we already have such a bad reputation. So maybe if we can now be seen to give away this heat, we help our reputation. And if we can steer this process so that they don't actually damage our already aging sewer system by taking out the heat and then causing a blockage and causing a spill and then even ruining our reputation more, we want to be involved in this. So that's very nice. Excited to look forward to.
Yeah, that's
and
good.
On a personal level, since the European project 10 years ago with me and Mohammed and Simon and others, we tried, I think we had 5 failed funding applications on this because basically our UKRI, our government research funder, was like, heat pumps, this already exists. And heat pumps have been here for 100 years and these systems are already operational systems. This is not novel. We don't fund this. And then we went to the more applied sort of industrial funding from the water utilities, and the water utilities were like, oh, no, that is
not
so novel and so unknown and we don't want to fund this. This is far too novel. So we were really stuck in the middle between not getting research funding because it already exists and not getting innovation funding because it was too novel.
It was too
for
risky.
10 years because it was too risky.
Oh my.
And it's kind of our Department of Net Zero that actually helped us with this in somewhat wake up the water utilities that this is going to happen whether you like it or not. So I guess that's a word to everyone that sometimes the time is simply not right for your idea and just shelve it somewhere, but don't forget about it and don't get upset about it. You may well use your idea. Your ideas may later on.
Resurgence again.
This is to maybe make everyone with a failed funding application feel maybe more hopeful for the future.
It is the grit you need when you're a researcher and you have all these blue sky ideas or really practical ideas. Sometimes it's much harder to just convince someone to give you that funding than it is to come up with the actual research idea itself. But no, I wish you luck with that, and we'll have to have you on for part 2 once that project's done to see how that, how people are responding, to check in on the, the data issue and the transparencies around CSOs, and what's happening with the inclusion of heat now holistically into the whole urban drainage process. Alma, it's been great just reflecting on also very geeky topics, also close to my heart, modeling, data, uncertainties. But like I do with every guest, I'd love to ask you a few questions so that listeners can get to know even more about you. You've already revealed a lot about knitting and, a lot of your passions. But yes, I guess starting with it, innovation is really one of these key words that centers around the work that researchers do. So in your view, what does the word innovation truly mean and how has it shaped the way you approach challenges and opportunities in your work?
It means having a lot of patience and talking with a lot of people many times to get the true understanding, because you have a research idea and there might be a need to really understand where the need comes from and what people I keep calling the practitioners actually need to really understand how you bring it from research into innovation, to really understand where you can sort of slot in and it takes a lot of patience. As you could see from the sewer heat recovery, the time also has to be right.
Yeah.
And you really need to understand when you want to make an innovation, that how you're actually going to bring this in practice. You really have to understand what drives the other partners and what problems do they have and how do they work. And you can't just come in and you really should do it differently. You have to really, so it's in my mind, it's a lot of talking and a lot of patience.
True. I guess we see far too many big unicorn success stories of people disrupting the industry. But in reality, I guess if you're really innovating, it's solving a problem that people have, that they realize they have and they need the solution for. And I guess coming with a solution that you refine over time and that you polish and eventually you pitch at the exact right moment. But that right moment is uncertain.
Of course, yes.
Common theme. Was there a key moment, book or person or event that completely changed the course of your career or mindset?
He still feels guilty about it. I talked to, when I met Francois at conferences, because of course I only was supposed to go to England for 3 years. And I've lived 22 years.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And in a couple of years, I will have lived longer in England than in the Netherlands. And Francois was like, oh, I feel so guilty. I make you just emigrate to England. I never meant you to, I changed your whole life,
But it's a
so yeah,
moment.
It was Francois that with Richard that sort of was like, oh yeah, I have a student wants to do a PhD with no funding. Oh, I have funding and no student. Oh, that's a great idea. And they had it all cooked up, and then they sort of forgot to tell me, more or less, or explain it to me.
But a moment.
But yeah, I met Francois after I was married to an Englishman and living in England for 15 years. I completely changed your life. And I was like, well, don't worry, I was there. I did it if I really wanted to go back to Netherlands, I would have done so.
And yeah, I guess, long-term mentors as well. Francois being a long-term mentor for you. I've met him a few times at conferences too. So, very nice person. We should get him on the show at some point.
You should do, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, he's doing lots of interesting things, always new jobs, he started more in his own company and even thinking of retirement. I'm not sure. You should ask him. I don't want to speak for him.
And I know Richard's also a great character. So Richard, if you're listening to this, let me know. Let's, if you're interested, let's get you on the show as well.
Yeah, then I was thinking books that, because you asked before and having books, but I have to say, because my mind is always a bit racing and busy, so I read maybe a book a week, so it's hard to pinpoint on one book. And I was like, I have lots of ideas from books, and I read about one a week or two a week, because otherwise I can't sleep. I have to bring my mind on other things.
That's a very good habit. I've tried to do it many times, and I have this period where I can, and usually at the start of the year I go through several books. I guess New Year's resolutions, read more, and then you read 3-4 books in the first month, and then it slowly tapers off. But how do you stick to it? It's that therapeuticness of, I guess,
I think so, because if I don't, I just end up staring at my phone at some sort of sales sites or news, and I did have Pinterest for a while, with my crafting.
Oh, yeah.
But then it kept showing you the same thing over and over again, and you kept looking for the same thing, seeing the same picture, and then you realize another half hour is gone. So I usually leave my phone in the kitchen at night, and then
that's a good
go and
tip,
pick
actually.
A book. And, and I kind of need it, because I get lots of thoughts jumbled in my head.
What kinds of books do you read? Fiction, non-fiction? You mentioned Bronte.
Lots of fiction, lots of really easy fiction books, and history and romantic books and history books. And one thing I don't really like is thrillers, because then I don't really relax with those.
That is true.
I just end up reading until 3 a.m. and then I still can't sleep. So there are quite some few good books, and then there's again a whole thing about, there was a shop in England about what they call the chick lit, which is a bit derogatory, because some of them are actually really good, and then you pick the book and the cover alone makes you sort of hide it under your chair and you read it on the train. And then there's some certain happy, flowery, girly cover that is, I think, really not doing some of these books justice. I mean, I have to admit that some of them are really quite easy to read and simple and a bit naff, but there's some really good ones out there. But I read quite lots of different things. And the one that changed your mind, I did admit that the Bronte one made me want to visit the moors, and then I went there with my mum, and then I realized Bradford was next to it. So maybe that did have some influence.
I think there's a biographical movie about Bronte.
There's several.
A recent one that came out, actually. I keep seeing trailers of it every now and then. I'll find the link and put it in the show notes. Maybe you can check it for accuracy of your understanding of the countryside, but also Emily Bronte. What tips and strategies can you offer in terms of time management? So how do you maintain a balance between your professional and personal time, other than the books?
It's hard. It's really, really hard. Because saying no is very hard.
True.
But I try not to get too stressed. I guess before I was a mum, I used to sometimes go in and work maybe 10 hours a day or whatever. I used to go in and then keep working, and then you do all your other stuff, and then come 5 o'clock, all your regular stuff is done, and until 7 or 8 in the evening, you have time to really think, do some of your research and do some, but that's just not sustainable. I got really tired, and I got a bit ill, and I was like, this can't go on like this. I'm going mad. So after I had my son, I went 4 days a week, and I thought I'm just going to keep sticking to that. But you have to be really, really strict, and I find it quite hard, especially when I know students want to see me, and sometimes they don't come and see me, but some master students would see me every day, and I really had to put the boundaries. It's half an hour a week. That's it, because I used to an hour and then another hour, and you just don't have that time. And I keep telling myself the work is never finished, especially with research. You can always do more, so maybe don't worry about getting something finished. So I kind of never finish things. I just go to my to-do list until whatever, and then when it's home time, I just go home.
I guess it's looking at what you've achieved in the day rather than what you still have to do as well.
And just try and prioritize at the start of the day. There's some forms you might need to fill for a student. There's some things that really do need doing. And more often than not, they take up your whole day, which is annoying. But you have to just try and be whenever you can do a small form quickly, do it straight away. And if not, you maybe spend an hour in the morning doing that and then literally put an alarm on your phone or something. And then like, okay, I stopped doing that. I'm going to do a few hours this paper and work from home or do something. But you have to be very, very rigorous. You have to be a bit harsh, which I've learned. But in the end, I thought, well, if I'm totally stressed and freaked out, the students, they might have me for an hour of a week, but they benefit more half an hour when I'm awake.
You want to make sure that your attention is not divided out to all the people, but that you actually protect your own attention span as well. And it's also mind management, I guess, because doing things quickly, if it takes 1 minute to do, getting it done so it doesn't plague you for the rest of the day. I guess that's also something I try to do as well, at least doing more than I have been. But yeah, certainly very tricky, but good tips.
And don't feel too bad about it because you got to look after your own mental health. I really liked the lady from London. Was it? I did listen to that.
Patrick Weber.
Yes.
Yeah, she had some really good tips there as well.
Because it's really important. Yeah, and I see it, my students, I do worry about them, the mental health. And I do wonder how it's somehow with COVID, but also the doom scrolling, the social media algorithms that just feeding you stuff and sucking you in some sort of spiral of
the dopamine spirals.
Same news. And I read some articles about that and it's worrying.
Yeah, it's dangerous. And I guess it begins with awareness. And, as long as we know what it does to our brains, we can manage that in a more sustainable way. But protect your time, I guess. And be harsh, but don't feel bad about it.
And don't feel bad about it, yeah. And sometimes it does mean missing opportunities.
Yeah.
That you just, you try and manage everything as best you can. And then a week later, you realize deadline has passed to do something, but then you can't do everything. So
it's like, it is what it is. At least that's what I tell myself all the time as well. FOMO is not fear of missing out. FOMO is not a healthy way to live, definitely. And so what is your favorite childhood memory?
Yeah, I guess there'll be several. That maybe either visiting, having the weekends with my family, and also like camping in summer. And sometimes I used to have some cousins joining me, or I went with my cousins because I lived in Rotterdam, which is very concrete. It's a bit of a concrete jungle. And from my bedroom window, I could see this factory. I lived close to the harbor, so I literally had this view of all these steel pipes from my bedroom window.
Oh, wow.
And big tanks of chemicals. And then just having a childhood memory of going somewhere, camping and waking up and seeing a mountain or a river or the sea as something beautiful.
That's beautiful.
And that's what I really like about Sheffield, because I think everyone from England said you need to come visit. You can visit Sheffield because it's a city roughly the similar size of Rotterdam, but it's wedged next to the Peak District, and I can walk from my house in a park, from my park in the farmlands. I can walk to the national park. Or I can take the bus and walk back home. I
mean, we've had Tom Young on the episode, and he's offered to give me the pub walk to show me all the bars.
Yes.
And he's got this map. But yes, I'll ask you for the nature walk then.
Nature walk, yes.
I'll do the several routes.
Yes, you need to. Yeah, because they say, but then in Sheffield, they always say Sheffield's the greenest city of Europe. But then when I Googled it, I tried to Google this, and then apparently 10 or 20 cities are the greenest city of Europe. But I think in Sheffield, there's most trees per person.
Oh, wow.
But then I also wonder they're cheating a bit, because there's some small villages and farms that have a Sheffield postcode, and you can sort of drive to the Peak District and you just find "Welcome to Sheffield" sign in this field with some heather and some sheep, and the actual city is hidden behind the hill. So it's quite funny. Well,
as we said, you can tell many stories with data, and I guess this one is to the advantage.
You can tweak your data set where you put the boundary of Sheffield. They seem to have put it in the fields around it, but there are way more parks, because where I grew up in Rotterdam, there was one small park where I live and one big park. And in Sheffield, every small neighbor, I haven't counted, there must be 50 of parks or more, because it's so steep, all the river valleys. You can't build on them, so all the rivers, it's a bit like they always joke, it's built on 7 hills, like Rome. And you have the 7 rivers or the rivers coming together in between, going right up. So you have like nice riverside walks straight up, almost near the city center.
Important for continuity. If you ever want to go on a jog, or I guess to not get lost, you just follow the river.
Yes.
But lovely memories. I certainly enjoy nature, and back in my childhood always loved playing in nature as well. And whenever we went to a different country and there was different nature, or there was a big open space, and with a playground as well, one of these more rudimentary ones where they use tree stumps and that kind of construction, I always enjoyed it as well.
And I thought that was just me, but I think more water engineers have that. I always used to sit in the river, make little dams, or with a bucket to look for little fishies. And
that was me at the beaches, but I would make these complicated water sand castles, which I really enjoyed. And then hermit crabs. We had a lot of hermit crabs, so we'd make a house for them. So what was one of the most challenging situations that you've ever faced in your career to date, and how did you overcome it?
Oh, there's been quite a few. I should have thought about this one before, shouldn't I? There's been quite a few. Yeah, it's the whole managing the academic system, because I started my PhD in Bradford, and then Richard Ashley got a job in Sheffield, so he moved our whole team to Sheffield. So then in my second year of my PhD, I moved to Sheffield, finished my PhD there. And then it was quite difficult at the time getting lecturer postdoc positions. And in a postdoc, you're always in this like, you like to continue your research, but you can't really, there's not much funding you can get as a postdoc. So you're really challenging trying to look for the next opportunity in a conference. What are you going to do next? I was like, well, I don't know.
It's a bit of a twilight zone, yes.
It's this zone that's really quite hard to manage. But eventually did get a job in Bradford after several failed attempts of looking for an academic position. And of course, after 2.5 years of Bradford, again,
you moved back to Sheffield.
They poached, was it Simon and Kirill? Because we have this like research excellence framework. Like, it's a bit like football transfers. Every 5 years, the people with a certain number of high quality papers gets moved around.
Okay.
And then Simon and Kirill didn't want to move with their team. So I just sort of set up I was 2.5 years in my first academic career as a lecturer, and then we moved the whole team. I moved with the team, but I had to decide stay in Bradford or move to Sheffield.
So you went Bradford, Sheffield.
Yes.
I guess you must be happy to be in Sheffield now.
Yeah. Although now again it's challenging. I suppose it's the academic. We're on the voluntary, about the third or fourth reorganization in a couple of years, and the second round of voluntary redundancies. And this time, civil engineering academics are on the list.
Oh.
So anybody that listens, we need more civil engineering, water engineering students. There's a lot of jobs for them, but they all go and study computer science.
Yeah,
and this is where we get back to data and models. You cannot study the models without studying the background, and you need the data. Because we have a lot of students going into aerospace mechanics, a lot in computer science, but civil is going down. And I hear it in other countries as well.
And yeah, a lot of people are trying to jump onto the AI hype, but you will quickly realize without the domain knowledge of the discipline like civil engineering or anything else, for example, these tools are not as useful. And so I think, these AI or whatever, is the next big hype. They're going to revolutionize the way we do things in our disciplines, but you're going to still need that fundamental knowledge, which is always important. Interesting challenges, but the academia is always that...
academia.
Uncertainty.
I think people have this idea of us sitting in our office doing lovely research and teaching the students. And that's still one of the best things about the job. It's guiding young people through and sometimes older people as well, through their dissertation and through their projects. And it's really nice, the difference between I teach both. Sadly, my master module of hydrology, the water engineering MSc, got scrapped because of lack of students. But I used to teach first years and fourth years. And there's some magical transformation that happens between seeing my first year tutees in the first year and then them coming back to talk to me about dissertation.
Yeah.
There's some sort of, they're equally tall. They don't grow physically, but in their mind, they grow so much. And it's really a privilege to work with people like that. But the academic world behind it can be far more harsh than people realize. It's a bit...
I certainly had my fair share of experiences, but I'm hoping to, I guess, define it in my own way now, going forward with my own company. So let's see what happens. But it was lovely to reconnect with people at this conference and, to see what's happening in the academic world, giving myself ideas of how to further my own knowledge and to help, I guess, the scientific body of knowledge as well.
Yeah, and in the end, you have to be, for the academic, people think, you have to be really the cleverest, but you just need a bit of luck. You need to be in the right place at the right time, and maybe an opening comes up, or when a professor won some funding and you can do your PhD or a postdoc there, or a lectureship or something comes up. It's not really you, it's the system. To everyone that's currently, especially people in this sort of twilight zone between a lecturer, PhD, postdoc, wanting to continue in academia, it's just... there's some luck involved, and it's not you, it's the system. So if it's dragging you down, you can do something else for a few years, still come back. Don't feel it's you.
No, definitely. It is not you. I think you always have something to offer to the world. You just got to find a way to do it and, persevere, like you did with the Torch project and the heat recovery. And so, that's really brilliant advice for young scientists, young academics starting out. Anything else you'd like to offer as advice for them? Yeah,
mainly just to... And also don't judge yourself too harshly, because especially with social media, you always see the pictures of everybody else's life looking perfect, and you hear cool stories, but everyone has their struggles.
Yeah.
And it's just they don't really show them. Everything gets curated. And go out and talk to people. Have a coffee with your housemate. Don't sit behind the screens all day, but go and talk to people.
Yeah.
Because it gets distorted. Sometimes you have an email with a colleague and then they storm past it. Now, what are you? And then you realize you've just misunderstood each other's language. And it's really easy to misunderstood face to face. It's really important to just communicate, to get out, and it's better for your mental health to just talk to people. I
can certainly agree. And for those who are on the entrepreneurial journey, I think go to a co-working space, that human contact. There's something more to it than just, the exchange, just that body language. There's something that happens. I can't explain it, but yeah, go do it. Trust us. Trust us, we're engineers.
Yes.
What would you like to be remembered for, Alma?
Somebody who tried to make some good things happen, I guess. Yeah, and somebody who tried also in her own time. Because I was reminded yesterday of the issues in gender balance and the Joint Committee Urban Drainage when they took the photo. And for whatever reasons, we really did not plan this. For whatever reason or others, the other 3 female members of the JCOD weren't there. So it was me and 17 men on the photo.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, gosh, this does not look good. But I like to be I really don't need, because some professors, because sometimes you look up at people like Anna, the teacher, Simon Tate, and they're so energetic and they have so much energy, and not everybody has this. I keep telling myself, I like to get there in my own. Well, I don't think I'll ever get that many papers or projects. I just don't have the energy, but I like to get there in my own pace and with my own work-life balance. So yeah, I like to make a name of having done some good researchers and hopefully helped some innovation happen, but also do this without going crazy myself.
Yeah, I guess protecting your sanity.
It's protecting my sanity. Yeah, and I think some of the Gen Z are really much more. I really liked the keynote, the discussion after Anna about do we need PhD students to publish 5 papers or not? When I made the comment that we need to have a long, hard look at ourselves, because in the end we make this ourselves. Because a PhD student in a number of countries, including England, the regulation doesn't say you need 4 papers or 3 papers. It's
Publish
more a cultural
perish,
thing. Yeah. And I think really quality over quantity is important here. But also just to judge that, if you are neurotypical, healthy, you have good mental health, everything in the lab goes well, you don't have caring responsibilities, and name 10 other things, you can probably make 3 good papers in 4 years. But for the majority of people, this is not the case. Either the lab breaks, or you have dyslexia, or you have caring responsibilities, or you have a health issue or something. And then it just becomes incredibly stressful to aim. You really should not aim for that. No, I'd rather have them having 1 paper or something that is good enough to be published as a paper. And then I don't want the PhD to become some sort of elitist activity.
And Ben, as being a person who was able to encourage people to do it at their own pace and to, build that confidence in themselves in their own way.
Yeah, and then I heard after some people say, it's easy to say for Anna because she already made it, And then I'm also thinking at myself, I sometimes do get annoyed. I see other colleagues who I think probably put more hours in than me. And yes, they do have a higher H factor and they do get more funding than me.
But to what end?
But then I think, to what end? Yeah. So... But I might watch the space because we do have another voluntary severance scheme. But in the end, I think I've gone beyond caring about that at the moment.
Yeah.
If they want to keep me, they do. If not, well, at least a good point in England, they need lots of sewer modelers. So I will be fine, whatever. I would love to keep my job in the university, but in the end... I like to keep it and not go insane in the process. So.
True. Yet another gem of advice as well. And Anna's been on the show. You can check out her episode. And a very, very amazing, inspiring individual as well. And she gave a keynote about this publish or perish, which we hear way too much in academia. But I think, do it on your own terms. And staying true to yourself, I guess. And I think people do see that. So
yeah, and I'm kind of hoping, as I said, I have my faith in the knitting in Gen Alpha and Gen Z that we do it to ourselves. Because somebody also came up to me and go, it's a nice thing, but it's not unrealistic. And I said, well, why not? Because people might do a PhD and then they go and start up a company or work for a utility or a company. They don't need to see the 3 publications. They need your experience. And then it's us, the more seniors academics that interview postdocs. We should be able to judge from a PhD thesis or from maybe 1 paper what the quality of a person is.
And not just from the number of papers.
And not from the number of papers. And also, if my PhD students publish a higher number of papers, I get more on my name.
Yeah.
But I really don't want to do that based on their health. So
very strong message here. And I think academia is also changing. Certainly AI is going to be turning that upside down. The mini-series, I think, says it all on this show. And so if you haven't heard it, do listen into it. I think we have a lot of open questions there. But Alma, as we wrap up this show, you mentioned you're not big on social media, but is there one social media channel that people can reach out to if they want to get in touch?
I have to admit that I'm on LinkedIn, but I have to admit I need to retrieve my password again because I've had people, I've had it more recently. I really need to. Yeah, there's my profile page. My University of Sheffield has a profile page with my information. And I keep telling myself that I think LinkedIn seems the lesser worst of all of them. It's the one page that I still remember the password, and that is live.
So definitely.
But it might take me a while to come back because I don't look on LinkedIn that regularly. I keep thinking I should do. I'm probably working with the utilities in the Torch project. They're quite keen on LinkedIn and in JCUD as well.
So we'll definitely put links to that in the show notes so that listeners can get in touch if they want to exchange with you, get to know you better as well. But thank you so much for coming onto the show. And like I do with every guest, I always give my guests the final word. So one last message for the listeners to take away from today.
Well, I guess stay true to yourself and don't let yourself become mad from all the mad rush around you sometimes, and stay calm and go for a walk and talk to someone.
Thank you very much.
And that wraps up our educational, insightful and entertaining episode with Alma Schellart. For more information on the known knowns and the unknown unknowns, resources on data and modeling, or just some knitting tutorials, check out the show notes for more information over at petermbach.com/podcast. And as always, thank you listeners for tuning into this episode and for your feedback and support. If you are enjoying this show, I would be incredibly grateful if you could share this podcast with your family, friends, colleagues, and even fellow journalists. Subscribe or follow this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, other podcast channels, or follow the LinkedIn group to stay up to date with the latest releases. If you're curious about me or my work in general, you can also check out my website or social media. Head to petermbach.com, my YouTube channel Peter Marcus Bach, that's Marcus with a C, or follow me on X at petermbach or Instagram at petermbach87. Feel free to reach out to me with any feedback or guest suggestions so that I can keep improving this show. The podcast's intro and outro song is called Starsky by Alex Karen. Stay tuned for our next episode and next guest to hear how they are tackling the grand challenges.